Imagine having a kind of superpower memory, right? Where you could read a nonfiction book, soak up the key lessons, and actually remember what matters. I
Hmm.
think we all wish we had that, especially with books we read to, learn and improve.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a common frustration. You spend hours reading all these books, maybe blogs, newsletters,
Yeah.
and then a few weeks later, you feel like most of the important stuff has just vanished.
Exactly. Like, could you honestly explain the main points of, say, Steal Like an Artist right now, or even one of the 48 Laws of Power?
It's tough. For most people, the answer is probably a bit hazy. Maybe not really.
And that's the real issue, isn't it? Our normal memory just left on its own. It often feels muddy, messy, unreliable.
Yeah, it's great for remembering something surprising, like, I don't know, getting hit by a ball unexpectedly. That sticks.
Right. A sensory thing?
But abstract ideas from a self-help book,
Yeah.
not so much. It struggles with that kind of information.
Which makes you wonder, what's the point of reading all this great stuff if the insights don't stick? If we can't actually use them?
Well, that's exactly what we want to dig into in this deep dive. Can we actually change that? Can we get better at remembering what we read and, maybe more importantly, putting it into practice?
So we've really looked into sources that break down the systems used by people who seem to have incredible recall.
Yep, and the goal is to pull out the actionable bits for you, the listener.
Okay, so let's start with the why. Why do we forget so much? It happens to everyone, especially with nonfiction.
It really does. You read a book, you're engaged, but then later,
Mm,
poof, it's like the knowledge just evaporates. Trying to recall specific details feels like grasping at smoke sometimes.
it does. And it's not necessarily our fault, right? The brain isn't really wired perfectly for retaining loads of abstract facts just from one reading.
Exactly. Memory varies a lot, obviously, but the average brain prioritizes stuff it thinks is, well, immediately useful or maybe even critical for survival. An abstract concept from a book doesn't usually hit that critical button unless we, you know, consciously make it important.
Which explains why just reading more often isn't the answer. You need something else.
You need a system,
Mm.
a deliberate way to capture and process that information. Otherwise, you're fighting against how your memory naturally works.
Okay, so moving towards solutions then. We looked at someone who seems to have cracked this code, someone who can just pull quotes and stories seemingly out of thin air from like thousands of
You're
books.
talking about Ryan Holiday.
Exactly. The author of The Obstacle is the Way, Ego is the Enemy. Hugely successful books. And he's known for having read, what, over 3,000 books?
It's pretty amazing. You listen to him talk, and he'll just effortlessly reference Eisenhower or William James or Marcus Aurelius Seneca.
Buddha, Confucius, the list goes on.
Right. It's clear this isn't just luck or some innate genius. There's a method behind it.
So we dug into his philosophy on reading and remembering, and it's actually quite, well, gentle.
Yeah, he puts it nicely. He asks, if you get just one or two life-changing things from a book that cost you, say, $11,
Mm-hmm.
is it so bad? His view is that a book takes you on a journey, and its job is to leave you with something important, not necessarily every single detail.
I like that perspective. It takes the pressure off trying to memorize everything.
And he really stresses that reading should be pleasurable. It's not a race.
Right. He uses that funny analogy.
Yeah, about, like, bragging about having the fastest sex or scarfing down food at a really nice restaurant. It sounds ridiculous, right?
It does.
So why would you brag about speed reading a deep book? He frames it completely differently.
How so?
He says reading is more like having a conversation with Ernest Hemingway or Marcus Aurelius or Doris Kearns Goodwin.
Ah, okay. That changes everything. It shifts your whole mindset from just consuming information.
To actually engaging with it,
Yeah.
thinking about it, talking back to it in your head.
That alone probably helps with retention, just changing how you approach it, slowing down, being present with the ideas.
Definitely. And this isn't just a philosophy for him. It's tied to a very practical system, a system he actually learned from another author, Robert Greene, when he was working for him.
Oh, interesting. So it's got a history.
Yeah, and he says he still uses it to this day. It's tried and tested.
So what is the system? Let's break it down.
Okay, so it's basically got three main parts. Simple, but effective. First, you take notes while you're reading the physical book.
And not just highlighting.
No, more active than that. Folding down page corners, underlining things that jump out at you, scribbling notes or questions in the margins, really interacting with the text.
Got it. Step 1. Active note-taking during reading. What's next?
Step 2 is crucial, revisiting and revising your notes. But here's the key. You do this after you finish the book.
After.
Yeah. You go back through all those folded pages and notes, and you transfer the stuff that you really liked or that really impacted you onto physical note cards.
Ah, okay. So you're filtering and condensing, making a second pass.
Exactly. It forces you to re-engage and decide what was really important.
And the third part.
That's categorizing and filing your notes. So on each note card, you write down the specific thought or the story or the quote, and then, this is clever, you sort these cards by theme.
By theme, not by book.
Right. By theme. So you might have themes like decision-making or dealing with adversity or whatever makes sense for you. He says you're essentially creating an exterior brain.
An exterior brain. I like that. So you're organizing the knowledge in a way that's useful across different contexts, not just tied to one book.
Precisely. It makes the insights retrievable when you need them for, writing, thinking, or just living your life.
Okay, that system makes intuitive sense, but let's connect it to the science bit. Why does this particular method actually help us remember more?
Well, it taps directly into how our memory works, particularly what's called explicit memory, that's remembering facts, ideas, events consciously.
Okay.
Our brains use shortcuts, right? Psychologists talk about heuristic memory processing. Basically, our brain prioritizes information that seems important. And how does it judge importance? Things that are frequently used, things that are recently used, or things that seem likely to be needed to make decisions.
Ah, okay. Frequent, recent, relevant.
Exactly. Now think about Ryan's system. Highlighting and making notes as you read, that's initial engagement. But then rewriting the key insights onto note cards. That hits recently used and frequently used again. You're processing it multiple times.
Right. The physical act of writing it again reinforces it.
Definitely. And then categorizing them by theme. That signals to your brain, hey, this information is organized and ready for future decisions or use. It marks it as valuable.
So the system isn't just random steps. It's actively working with our brain's natural tendencies for remembering.
Precisely. It's about putting in the work in a smart way. Reading, taking notes, studying, organizing, making use of it.
Which really explains why Ryan Holiday is such a big fan of the analog approach, right? Physical books, physical note cards.
Yeah, he makes a point about that. He feels that people listening to audiobooks or even just reading on e-readers, where the highlights just sort of vanish into some file.
They don't get the same level of recall.
Often, yeah. He talks about the benefit of actually getting away from the screen, sitting down, and engaging deeply with the world in front of you, meaning the physical book and your notes.
There's something about that tactile process.
Absolutely. And I actually tried this myself, using his system with one of his own books, Courage is Calling.
Oh, you did? How did it go?
Well, honestly, it was very slow and methodical. It definitely slowed down my reading speed, maybe by like 30 or 40%.
Wow, okay. That's significant. Did it feel worthwhile?
It did, but it required a shift in perspective. The big realization was, okay, this isn't about becoming superhuman and devouring books in a day.
Right, it's not about speed.
No, it's about taking the time to digest the information, think critically about it, and figure out how you might actually reuse or apply what you're learning. And honestly, to kind of enjoy that deeper engagement.
So less consumption, more digestion and connection.
Exactly. And the outcome. I ended up with maybe 20 to 30 note cards from that one book. Really distilled, useful insights.
That's actually a really solid, tangible output from one book, a set of core ideas ready to use.
Yeah, it felt like I truly processed it, not just read it.
So this really brings us to the core takeaway, doesn't it? It seems so simple but profound. You don't remember things by accident.
Nope. It requires intention. It requires a system. Organizing those notes into different buckets, categories, and themes is key.
And maybe the biggest insight for me is that you actually can't remember everything you want to. And maybe you shouldn't even try.
Right. The goal isn't perfect internal recall of everything. It's building that effective exterior brain. Store the knowledge reliably outside your head.
That feels liberating, actually. It frees up mental energy. You know the information is safe and accessible without having to constantly juggle it in your working memory.
And it's important to remember that these systems are adaptable. Ryan Holiday himself said his system is an amalgamation combination that changed over time.
So you don't have to copy his system exactly.
Not at all. You can take inspiration and create your own spin on it. Maybe
Yeah.
use a digital tool for the filing or a slightly different note-taking method.
The key is just starting, right? Even if it's not perfect.
Absolutely. He stresses starting imperfectly rather than getting paralyzed by the hope or the delusion of perfection. Just start doing it.
Keep doing it always and getting better as you go. Find what works for you.
That's the essence of it. Consistent, active engagement and organization.
Okay, so let's quickly recap. We've seen how having a structured, deliberate approach to reading and note-taking, whether it's analog like Ryan Holiday prefers, or maybe digital, or a mix, can seriously transform your ability to actually retain and use knowledge.
Yeah, it's less about aiming for flawless memory and more about building that reliable exterior brain, that second brain, and really engaging deeply with what you're learning.
Which leads to a final thought, maybe a challenge for you listening. What information are you currently trying to just cram into your muddy, messy, and unreliable brain?
What knowledge could be better served if it was organized, connected, and stored effectively outside your head.
Imagine the clarity, the reduced mental load, and the actual increase in retention you could get by adopting some kind of system. This whole deep dive into remembering what you read, it feels like just the first step in understanding how powerful building that second brain can really be.